Hi, I'm the True Wise Gamer, giving off my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. No light bits here because, my camera was messing up, but anyway, Lord of the Rings. It's kind of a weird series when you really start to think about it. And that's really mostly because of how static it is. By that I mean there's no real true new material introduced into it. Sure, there are things that adapted and add their own things, but they never really mix into canon, if that makes sense. It's just this sort of frozen thing that no longer feels natural in some regard, and it really baffles me. I mean, in this world, nothing ever truly stays the same, and it's just weird to notice that for so long. And I get the family doesn't really want anyone to mess with it, which fair enough, but again, it's just weird. But in any case, why talk about that? Well, that's because we have something interesting today. Today, we are talking about an RPG that takes place during the movies in the background. And well, this sort of idea comes with its own sort of issues. For example, it's sort of limiting means if it wasn't shown in the movies or even mentioned, it can't be used. And if you're wondering, wait, why couldn't they use the book? Because you see, Lord of the Rings has two licenses. The one's based on the books, and the one based on the movies. Why aren't they just the same thing? I'll never know, but it's legal mumbo jumbo. And I don't say that to mean like it can't be used in an interesting way, but we'll get into that later. The developers of this game actually came to a shock to me because I didn't know it was Red Shore Games. For those who don't know, that was the original name for Visceral Games. Yes, the ones that made the original Dead Space trilogy. And were also killed. Because of course. In any case, let's actually talk about the game since I do actually tend to prolong the intro too much and really need to stop doing that. So let us begin the third aid. The game begins with an intro done by the ever-awesome sounding Ian McKellar, who did Gandalf, basically a retelling of Lord of the Rings mythos and intro. As he goes on, he actually introduces us to one of our main characters, a Gondorian who is searching for Boromir, Berefor. And why he's searching for him is complicated, we'll get into that in a bit. On his way, he actually finds some Nazgul. Wait, what? For now, it seems a little odd, but later on, it becomes way dumber. In any case, he can't handle the Nazgul. Well, I mean right now, but later on he can. We'll get into that later. He is soon saved by an elf named Idriel, in which they journey off to do stuff. That is the best way to explain things without really being mean. Because this plot, for lack of a better term, is not there. And I don't mean just stuff going on. Stuff is going on. I just mean none of it really matters. A good example of what I'm talking about, you meet a Rohirrim named Erwin, who's just here. He does nothing for the plot. He's literally introduced about literally a third into the second half of the game, and he's barely there in the plot to begin with. I mean, hell, he's sometimes not in cutscenes, and I mean, like, that goes for every character, but you get my point. He is just a non-entity in this plot, and the plot has nothing to do with him. Hell, Elagast is just here to state the bloody obvious. Yes, we are literally looking at him just tracking a corpse that is right the heck there. Seriously, what the heck? Honestly, I could go on to more about how the game does nothing with the characters, but I think the best example of how to show off what's wrong with this game is with one character who had the absolute most potential. That being the character Hadhood. Basically, he's a character that's introduced alongside Elagast. Basically, he's on a journey to find something in Moria. Why is he going to Moria? A lot of reasons that are not stated, but we'll get into that later. But in any case, he's a dwarf. In an RPG, they should have actually really focused on him and actually, let him talk about things like what's going on with the other races, or like what's happening with the dwarf. In fact, since the games are based on the movie, they actually had the opportunity to use the actors from the movies. And it lacks again because I had to ask, why did they even bother? Because they don't really matter. I mean, there's not even a cool scene where Hadhood is talking to Gimli about their race and about how much their people aren't handling this war well at all. Which you can do at least because you don't have to mention the Battle of Dale. You could just say they're just not handling things well. But no, just have him repeat the lines he said in the movies to a character we don't care about. Actually, speaking of that character, Berefor, Idriel, and Merwin are a part of this stupid, and I have to just say, the dumbest love triangle I have ever seen in my life, and that is saying something. It just keeps popping up in my head about just, why did they even include this? I mean, like, they tried to make Berefor and Idriel a thing even though it's so barely built out that it's a blink and you'll miss it in the literal sense. Then suddenly comes this character, and then this stupid love triangle happens, even though it has no need of it, since it goes nowhere and is barely built up. That it existing here in this game, when that type could have been used for literally anything else, it's just baffling to me. And to just show off how wasted this plot is, you wanna know what happens when we learn that Boromir's dead? Nothing, because that would imply there was any interaction or reaction from Berefor about his captain's death. I mean, like, it's the entire reason the game's journey began. And you're telling me we should just ignore that now because we learned he's dead and we don't even ask the Fellowship what the hell happened to him or how he died? The only reason we know as the audience is because of our meta knowledge and some cutscenes which I can't show for legal reasons because of the bloody hell copyright bots. And to mention these are cutscenes that show off some lore stuff that matters not really that much into this game. All of it was well done by Ian McKellar, but again, these things are so not useful. I mean, like, when he has to mention Hadhood's kid dying in Moria, I think that shows you something's wrong with your plot. In fact, these scenes reminded me way too much of Final Fantasy XIII's overall plot, where nothing happened, anything that was important, that needed to be shown or known, was in the data logs to know what's actually going on. What the hell? Heck, you wanna know how the game ends? Well, it ends with the party just fighting the 8 Nazgul, who by this point, by the way, were kind of actually common foes at times, since they would randomly spawn in, and it's boring. And if you're wondering why we were not fighting the 9th one, well, the Witch King Agmar was dead because we had just killed him earlier. Though speaking of the Witch King Agmar, we need to talk about Berefor again. For you see, Berefor was searching for Boromir by Sauron. Yes, seriously. They thought he would be the one to try to take the ring, so they tried to get Berefor to him, and then try to use him to get the ring back to Sauron, but also Saruman was a part of this for some reason, and it's like, I could care less about trying to actually explain what's going on, because it doesn't really matter. And if you're wondering why the Nazgul were trying to kill him in the beginning, don't ask me, I'm still confused. And it really just kind of perplexes me because why wasn't the game character the major focus? The best way to explain this plot is that I'm just waiting for it to actually start when it's actually over. And you want to know what the sad part is? The gameplay is okay. Not properly balanced, to say the least, but it's at least somewhat more enjoyable than, Final Fantasy XIII's gameplay. So at least there's that. So for me, originally, I was surprised that the game was actually a turn-based RPG from the West, since they don't really do that much. In fact, the executive producer for this game actually has connections to some games like that, like Final Fantasy VII, and he also directed Parasite Eve, which is kinda cool. Plus, also, he really wanted this game to be a thing, so at least he did that. Though, speaking on Square games, you can disturbingly tell that it's very similar to Final Fantasy X's battle system, which was a good combat system, so it actually has a nice foundation. I don't usually have a problem with games copying other systems, as long as they have their own unique twist to certain things about them, I'm usually fine with it. Like Final Fantasy X, you have 3 members in a party, which you can switch out in battle with another character, and which of the character's turns can be shown on this little thing on the side. Which I actually really did like, because I really prefer when RPGs show you the turn progression so that you can actually plan shit out more. Like, for example, if your opponent enemy, is a warg or something, you can actually, kill them before their turn comes up, allowing you to actually use your turns a little more effectively. And to head back to the idea of having its own ideas, the game has an interesting idea, but it's really flawed because it doesn't really work well all the time, that being the skill point system. In this game, it's set up magic, well, except Idriel, but in any case, you use action points to perform skills in battle, and as you use them, you'll gain more points to learn new skills, though it takes a long time to earn enough to gain a new skill, and sadly, a good chunk of them are useless. It's not like they're not useful at first, it's just that the multi-hitting skills later on are just fundamentally better since they can just hit more, thus more damage. I mean, there are stat-reducing moves, and they are useful at times, but not that useful against mobs. Unless they have a lot of HP, which some do, so you might not want to use them since the animation take a good long while just to use them. If you'll notice in the footage, I actually have this emulated and running at 60 FPS. That's mostly because I remembered my first playthrough and how unbearably long this game was. I really have to mention this. Anyone who makes an RPG, please for the love of all that is good, make your animations short or skippable. Since, yeah, it looks cool at first, but it's really annoying to waste 5 seconds of my fucking life to see a move I've seen 100 times. And like I stated before, most are useless, meaning you're going to see a lot of the same moves a lot of the time. It also wouldn't help with the leveling system baffling me since it's kind of odd. And I mean, like, just looking at the names really doesn't confuse me. Like, you're looking at me like saying, like, what the hell's wrong with me? It looks simple enough. And you're right, but some of the stats are a little odd. For example, the speed stat. Yeah, I know, right? Like, come on, man. That just shows you how fast your character can go. And you're right, but it also determines my defense. Yeah, seriously. I mean, armor does as well, but my point still stands. Plus also, I have no idea if skill attacks are determined by my strength or my spirit stat, since it never really elaborates. It does not help with how negligent in battle these stats feel. Which leads into the armor system, which for the most part you'll be focusing on, since it will actually dictate most of your other stats as well. And to give a soft praise to the game, it was kind of cool that they actually bothered to create all these different kind of armor skins. I wish it was put onto the story, but whatever. There's actually quite a lot of armor in this game, like a lot. In fact, there are a few side quests that lead to new gear that more times than not are worthless as you'll progress, better gear will be provided to you. And to reference this now, there are also a bunch of items to heal you and other stuff, which for the most part are useless except for the ones that heal your HP and your AP, which for the most part, there was an item in the game that gives you the ability to just crank this stuff out every turn, meaning that, yeah, you could effectively have infinite healing items, which just breaks the game in half. And honestly, I didn't even bother on my original playthrough to do that, since most of the enemies, if you're mostly leveling up naturally, you'll handle most foes without an issue. Plus, with the saving spots, you can also heal up too, though you have to save to do that for some reason. I don't know why. So going back on difficulty, there is a weird curve. Well, basically the game's really easy at first, like mind-numbingly easy. Then it ramps it up, but not so much that it's actually a challenge, it just takes a lot longer just to kill them. I mean, like, the only time I had a real hard time with the game was the Balrog, which, as long as you're constantly healing your team members, you'll be fine. And strangely, he's the only boss that has an immunity to one thing in the game that kind of breaks it in half as well. That being crippling a move. Crippling moves just basically move their turn back, which just busted the game's head open, basically making it borderline easier. Like, you can do this so much that the Witch King himself can actually have no turns. Like, I'm not even joking. I did that once in my original playthrough. But if you'll notice in the footage, I haven't really shown him. Well, that's again because I didn't bother to beat the game again, because the idea of beating this game again was, again, so mind-numbingly boring to me that the idea of doing that, I would have just stabbed my own eye out. And yes, I really could not stand to go past after the 13-hour mark, which means I was about 3/4 of the way done. So this game's actually about 20 hours long if you're not wasting your time and you know exactly what you need to do. But at the end of the day, how bad do I think this game is? I can at least say it's not as bad as Final Fantasy 13 because again, Final Fantasy 13 is one of the worst RPGs ever made, if not one of the worst games ever made because of how stupid it is. Here, on the other hand, there seems to be at least some ideas of what to do and some good foundations. Otherwise, some shaky ideas, but otherwise could have worked. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention this during my script reading. I didn't mention Legolas. You see, I wanted to mention him because earlier he didn't use a bow. I just want you to mention that. He doesn't use a bow. Like, he doesn't use a bow. Like, the one thing he's known to have. What the hell? I just don't know what's wrong with this game. Next time, we're actually going to have a fun game this time.